With us today, welcome Vice President Robert Davis. Identify yourself and proceed.
Good afternoon, Chair Lee and members. Thank you for the invitation to be here today. For the record, I am Alice Roberts Davis. I am the Vice President for University Services at the University of Minnesota. This time last year, I would have been testifying in front of you in a different capacity as Commissioner of Administration, but this year I'm with the university still doing work to contribute to the great state of Minnesota. I am very pleased to have also with us here today two of our regents for the university, Regent Farnsworth and Regent Turner. We really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you about the partnership between the state and the university. Since HEAPR was first enacted by the state in 1994, the university has made it a top priority of our requests. This year, it is our only priority. Our request is for $500 million, similar to our colleagues at Minnesota State, and Interim President Ettinger and their chancellor have been working closely together all over the state to talk about why this is such a high priority for both of our systems. This is a different approach than we've had in the past because our circumstances are so dire that our message is that if you will help us with this, we will not ask for anything else. Additionally, we've heard from the legislature anecdotally over the years that we shouldn't be building more buildings, but we should be taking care of what we already have. And so our message to you is that we've heard you, and we are responding by asking only for HEAPR dollars. We won't build any net new square footage. We will work on implementing the HEAPR dollars that are funded, and we will consolidate the space that we already have and also shed or demolish any obsolete space. When we look at our existing facilities, we use a systematic approach to assess and grade the condition of our facilities, much like the state does. What's particularly concerning for us is that we now have nearly $6 billion in need, and more than 30% of our space is rated poor or critical. You should really look at this and read the red and yellow pieces of the donut together, because properties that are in fair or below average condition can fall into poor and critical condition very rapidly without a timely investment. For the university, state bond funding has been less predictable than ever. There is very little ability for us to forecast either how much funding the university will receive, when it will receive funding, and even if it will receive funding. That unpredictability makes it very difficult for us to create accurate and meaningful capital plans and to align the development of our individual reinvestment projects over the availability of state funding. Over the last decade, the university has only received about 10% of the funding that we've requested, and in half of those past 10 years, we've received $0 for HEAPR. Buildings that are already in disrepair have slid deeper into disrepair. Now, each of us knows that if you own a home that's 50, 60, or 70 years old or older, and that's what some of our buildings are, you can expect to make major replacements and repairs to plumbing or wiring or doors and windows and roofs, but we want to do that so that we don't have catastrophic failures in our buildings, and we're in the same situation at the university. An emergency repair is far more expensive than a planned upgrade. Working with our facility assessment and benchmarking partners, we're able to estimate how much should be invested each year. The yellow range on this graph represents facility renewal targets, the bottom line indicating the minimum amount of funding necessary to hold ground on facility upkeep, and the upper line indicating the target to actually make progress on reducing our $5.9 billion facility renewal need. You'll also note that the university makes significant contributions to this as well. An estimated $700 million has been added to the backlog over the last 10-year period. In the years where we do receive state support, we're typically able to meet our renewal targets. So although figures and graphs are helpful for context, it's equally, if not more important, to talk about the outcomes of your support of our 2024 request and what that will have. I'd like to lead with safety and accessibility because these things are so fundamental to operating a campus that is safe and welcoming for all students, staff, faculty, and visitors. Your full support of our $500 million request would invest over $100 million across more than 60 safety, code, and accessibility projects on all of our campuses. Projects like the Washington Avenue pedestrian bridge, where we desperately need to replace the crumbling structure and provide a safer railing option, is a critical priority. We need to update the Multi-Ethnic Resource Center in Morris, which lacks an elevator or accessible restrooms, and the visitor cabin in Itasca, where we need to add an entrance ramp, which will allow equal access for visitors with limited mobility. Reliability comes next on our list of priorities because we can't expect to maintain our status as a top research and teaching university when we can't rely on our buildings. It's a fact that planned repairs are less costly and less disruptive. When we are unable to keep up, we have emergencies like power outages and building leaks that can displace a class or researcher for hours or even days. And that did happen in Duluth over the summer because of heat. And you can imagine the angst of a researcher who's been working on a project for days, months, or years, who may be concerned about losing research because of a building failure. Emergencies also tend to create cascading problems when a roof leaks and when water gets inside, where all of a sudden there's a host of problems from mold to potential contact with critical mechanical or electrical systems. Your support will help us tackle repairs like replacing natural gas lines in Crookston, fixing the roof at McNeil Hall on the St. Paul campus, and completely overhauling the mechanical equipment in the Food Science Nutrition building that supports their labs and food pilot plant. Finally, your support will protect and extend the investments that the state has made in the past. More than half of the used buildings are over 50 years old, and many are far older than that. In fact, our oldest building, Eddy Hall, is almost 140 years old. We had an opportunity to tour many of you through Eddy Hall this fall and some of our other historic buildings, and if you did not get a chance to take that tour, we would love to give you that tour at some point. But we hope that you could appreciate how special these buildings are to our campus and to the state, and also how critical it is for us to keep up with the reinvestment so that they can remain safe and functional for years to come. Your support would help us renew Eddy Hall into a new student services hub, as well as restore the exterior facade at Patee and waterproof the foundation, which would allow us to turn this into a new American Indian Studies facility. The photos at the top are from the 1914 portion of McNeil Hall in St. Paul, where we waited too long, and that led to a near miss when a large chunk of masonry peeled off from the ceiling and landed on a conference room table, and fortunately no one was there when that happened. We know that HEAPR is cheaper. It's more cost effective to extend the life of an existing building than to build a new one, and it's also much less expensive and disruptive to do planned repairs and replacement than to address an emergency failure. HEAPR investments allow us to fix the core infrastructure problems that come along with every aging building, which in turn allows colleges to invest in their programmatic needs and make the university a preeminent teaching and researching institution. I'd like to give you a real example to further illustrate the point. This is the 1948 mechanical engineering building that was severely outdated for modern teaching and learning. The poor condition of the facility, especially the labs, was negatively affecting student experience and impacting the quality of education. Faculty could not pursue certain areas of research due to code issues in their laboratories, and more than one improvised solution had been put in place by the resourceful engineer that we had working in the building. We had a choice to either renovate or replace. So along with some university funding, we also invested a total of $47 million in HEAPR over 3 phases, with construction concluding in 2020. We estimate that a new building would have cost more than $100 million, not including demolition, utility, and so forth. So additionally, it would have required a total occupant displacement and disruption to programming, which was mostly avoided through the phased HEAPR approach. The core HEAPR investments allowed the university to then reinvest back into the labs with modern program enhancements to restore the usability and competitiveness of these key programs. HEAPR funds are allocated to every campus as well as research and outreach centers located throughout the state. As a starting point, we use a straightforward formula to determine allocation to use at each campus based on size and condition. Supplemental HEAPR is provided to the system campuses on occasion to help advance larger projects. Over the last 5 years, the actual allocation to system campuses has been notably larger than the model would prescribe. As the governor's proposed $103 million, we would support the number one request for each of the system campuses. For Crookston, that would be the heating plant, which needs critical improvements for reliability. In Duluth, Heller Hall needs comprehensive HVAC and code renewal. Morris needs multi-ethnic resource centers, major improvements to code and life safety. At the Twin Cities, we would improve the Washington Avenue pedestrian bridge and replace the deteriorated pedestrian enclosure and safety railings. And finally, on the St. Paul campus, we would improve the food science and nutrition building because it needs comprehensive code, life safety, and HVAC renewal. So for many of us, we think of investment in HEAPR as investment in buildings, but it really is an investment in our future workforce. As a state, we've done an outstanding job investing in our K-12 education, and a lot of students who are coming out of their high schools are looking at the university's facilities as an actual step backward because of the age and the dated laboratories and facilities that we have, and they start to look at other competitive universities. When that happens and they go to other states or other universities outside of the state, they build relationships, both personally and professionally, and they don't return to the state. For us, this is really about a workforce issue. We see that far more students leave the state than come to the state for education, and so if we want to ensure that we're competitive and have a long-term workforce in the state, we really do have to provide assets that are attractive to our top talented students. When we receive state funding, we put it to good use, and we are poised to do the same thing in 2024. As we reported in January, 94% of the 2023 appropriation has already been allocated to critical renewal projects. It's clear that capital investment is good for the local economy too, because more than 90% of our expenditures go back to vendors in Minnesota. I'd like to close by saying thank you for your past partnership and assuring you that we have more than enough shovel-ready projects for 2024, and we would just ask that you fully fund our request of $500 million so that we can attack the projects that are so important to the campuses of the University of Minnesota and our students, faculty, and staff.
Thank you. And then it's my understanding that there's 2 other presenters.
We do have other presenters.
Okay.
Would you like to move directly into those, Chair Lee?
We'll have them come down, and then after that, we'll take members' questions.
Okay.
So
thank you.
next up, we
So-
have Dr. Hill Gallant.
Thank you.
And then if Mr. Andrew Larson can just come down too. Welcome, Professor. Please identify yourself for the record and proceed.
Chair Lee and members of the committee, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me today. My name is Kathleen Hill-Gallant, and I am an associate professor of nutrition in the Department of Food Science and Nutrition at the University of Minnesota, and I am a resident of Maple Grove. I work in the Food Science and Nutrition building that was just highlighted, which is located on the St. Paul campus. There, I teach both undergraduate and graduate students, and I conduct research related to nutrition in various chronic disease states. So our building is one with critical needs for infrastructure improvements that are included in this HEPA request, and these are very long overdue. They're affecting the safety, the learning environment, research productivity, as well as our ability to secure external research funding to bring into the university, and ultimately our ability to fulfill our land grant mission on research, teaching, and service to the state of Minnesota. I came to the U in 2020 from another Big Ten land grant peer institution, and I came here for the excellent reputation of the University of Minnesota, as well as to be closer to my family living here in Minnesota. However, I quickly experienced challenges related to the condition of our building. So a key example is that when I purchased a critical instrument necessary for my research, which really had very simple electrical and ventilation needs, it ended up costing a construction project to retrofit the building that cost more than the instrument itself. And this was due to that aged infrastructure, which included the need for asbestos abatement. So the aging infrastructure of our building really impedes and makes more costly our ability to conduct and fund research. I am also currently awaiting a significant grant of several $1 million from the National Institutes of Health to conduct 2 clinical trials in nutrition in cardiovascular health related to chronic kidney disease. But the success of that project and the ability to continue to achieve funding like that relies on having adequate facilities. Our department is a hub for food science and nutrition in the state. And through our mission, we help the vast Minnesota ag and food industries, farmers, as well as the health and nutrition of Minnesotans. Our community nutrition research and outreach reaches to various communities, including partnerships in urban, rural, and tribal communities across the state. And notably, I'm a registered dietitian. My teaching involves teaching future registered dietitians, both in the undergraduate and graduate programs. And approximately 75% of the dietitians who practice in the state of Minnesota receive their education and their training through our department. Dietitians, if you're not familiar with their role, they have a critical role in chronic disease prevention, and they provide nutrition care within the healthcare system for people who are dealing with chronic diseases and other medical conditions. So continuing being able to train these health professionals is very important. So in closing, I urge you to fully support this HEPA request so that we can continue to fulfill our mission.
Thank you. Mr. Larson, please identify yourself and proceed.
Chair Lee and members of the committee, thank you all for allowing me to speak this afternoon. My name is Andrew Larson, and I'm a third-year student at the University of Minnesota, studying computer science, and am additionally the speaker forum at the undergraduate student government. I'm originally from Bloomington, Minnesota, and decided to attend the university over other options for a number of reasons, including its statewide impact. Today, I'm speaking in support of the university's 2024 capital renewal request to reinvest in existing campus buildings and infrastructure. These projects will increase student safety and accessibility and improve student learning and success. I'd like to take a couple of minutes to go over a few items included in the request and their importance for students at the university. First of these is the Washington Avenue pedestrian bridge on the Twin Cities campus. The bridge is used by thousands of students each day and has for some time been in need of further investment, particularly investments to improvements that will contribute to pedestrian and student safety, an initiative that has been a community priority for some time. Another item of importance to students is campus accessibility. 1/2 of the University of Minnesota buildings are 50 years of age or older, and state funding is needed to upgrade aging elevators and non-ADA compliant restrooms. Inaccessible buildings on campus lead to missed learning opportunities and place a burden on students and detract from their ability to thrive academically, compromising the university's ability to deliver world-class education to all of its students. I believe an investment in the University of Minnesota is an investment in our state's future workforce and communities. The projects in the request before you ensure that students can thrive academically and professionally, and that the university can remain a leader in higher education. Chair Lee and members of the committee, thank you again for providing me this opportunity to speak today.
Thank you both for your testimony. Can we get Vice President Roberts Davis back to the lectern?
Are we staying?
You two can go, and we have questions for you. We'll have you come back up. Thank you both. First up, we have Representative Erdahl.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the testifier. You all settled in now?
I am, thank you.
All right. So you'd like 500 million, but your request is 103. Now, how much does the U contribute to the HEPA projects?
Chair Lee, Representative Erdahl, the request is 500 million. The governor's recommendation is 100 million. HEPA is a formulaic process, so it depends on the project. If we were doing a renovation of a building, HEPA would cover some of the repairs and replacement aspects of the project. The university would cover other aspects of the project, and so it's difficult for me to say how much money exactly would come from the university, but it's a 1/3, 2/3 comparison for when we're doing new construction versus repair replacement.
Representative Erdahl.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, obviously the difficulty we have here is that asset preservation needs across the whole state of Minnesota are gigantic.
Absolutely.
One of the failures, I think, of the legislative process over the many years has been the failure to keep up with the property that the state of Minnesota owns.
Agreed.
And so I'm guessing that we'll do the best we can to try to keep you from falling too much more behind. But, I mean, very simply, looking at the figures, between you and Minnesota State, of what we can do, the ceiling is $830 million, so you're looking at almost a fourth of that for our education systems. So it's going to come down to what can we do with our, and certainly yours and Minnesota State's requests are I think, very legitimate and very needed. It just will be coming down to what can we do when we look at the DNR and our water projects and all of these other things that are also going to be on our table. So, appreciate that you have the commitment and the desire. We'll just have to take a look at how we can prioritize what we can get done. But I assure you that the university and our state colleges remain one of my priorities.
Thank you, Representative Erdahl. Representative Pawlowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And first of all, I'd like to thank the university for giving us a breakdown by campus. And I'm going to repeat a couple of things that you said just for clarity. But for instance, if we look at Crookston and Duluth, these are in rank order of priority. So the first in Crookston is the heating plant, and the first in Duluth is Heller Hall. That's correct, right?
Vice President Roberts Davis.
So the order of priority that you gave us is by campus, and the number one priority is listed at the top for each campus.
Chair Lee, Representative Pulaski, I'm just double checking that that is true. And I believe that that is almost accurate without exception, except for the Twin Cities campus. On the Twin Cities campus, our top priorities would be the bridge, the Washington Avenue pedestrian bridge, which is number 55. Food science nutrition is accurate, number 47 at the top. So, yes.
Representative Pawlowski.
So, Mr. Chair and Vice President Roberts Davis, we may have an interesting method here of coming to a number. If we came up with a HEAPR number, we would be doing it by perhaps adding up their number one priorities, and then we would be sure that the number one priorities would be taken care of. And I'm not asking the chair that as much as I'm asking Vice President Robert Davis. Would that be correct? So if we came up with a rather odd number instead of an even number, it would be taking these priorities and saying, all right, we're going to add those up, and that's what we're going to give you, and we're going to be sure that those are taken care of.
Vice President Roberts Davis.
Chair Lee, Representative Pulaski, if you take those numbers of those top priorities, you will come to roughly $103 million, which is the governor's recommendation. And so we're trying to back into that number. We would have a little bit of money left over to do some miscellaneous building envelope projects, windows, roofs, things like that. But you generally come to about $103 million. We would really like to see some additional projects that are going to be taken care of, because although these are our top priorities, there are many that are also critical life safety projects that need to be taken care of as well.
Representative Pulaski.
Mr. Chair and Vice President Roberts Davis, I'm not suggesting we even get to 100. I'm not sure what the number is going to be. But I want to focus in on one, on the heating plant for Crookston, and the paragraph that you have on your handout, where this was built in 1911. The campus must have been dramatically different then. And then you state there were major improvements made to improve the reliability of this in recent years. Can you tell me what those improvements were and how much in recent years?
Vice President Roberts Davis.
Chair Lee, Representative Pulaski, I cannot tell you specifically what those improvements would have been in recent years. I'd be happy to get that information for you. But what I can tell you is that the heating plant has been extremely unreliable. And with Crookston being our coldest weather location and having suffered bouts with having no heat on the campus for students, it is critical that we make an investment in that heating plant.
Representative Pulaski.
Yeah, Mr. Chair and Vice President Robert Davis, I'm very familiar with heating plants in cold climates. Does this heating plant also pump water, for instance, out of any basements of these buildings that would be critical when we get to January, February, March? And if this heating plant breaks down, it no longer pumps that water out of the basements of those buildings?
Vice President Roberts Davis.
Chair Lee, Representative Pulaski, I don't believe that it does. I'll ask for help from a friend.
Welcome. Please identify yourself and proceed to Representative Pulaski's questions.
So my name is Brian Swanson. I'm Assistant Vice President with University Services. If I can go back one question about the recent upgrades in the heating plant. Those were not necessarily made to the heating plant itself. The reference was to the electrical infrastructure that feeds the heating plant. So we've worked a lot on the Crookston campus electrical infrastructure. And you might recall from a few years ago, we had a massive power outage that took out the electricity to the shared Crookston, the football stadium that the Crookston High School uses with the campus. So the $6 million, we made a fairly substantial investment in electrical infrastructure, but the heating plant itself, I don't think has had any major investments in it since maybe the 80s.
Representative Pulaski.
Mr. Chair, the 1980s? Is that what you just said?
To
So maybe
portions
you
of
should
it, I
have
believe.
a paragraph in here about recent upgrades were done decades ago. But I'm going to continue with another. Mr. Chair, and now that we've got everybody here, does this also cool the campus as well as heat it?
Mr. Swanson.
Representative Pulaski, the Crookston heating plant, I believe, is just a heating plant and not a central cooling plant.
All right. Then I've
Representative Pulaski.
got one last question. Does the university ever seek out alumni support for fixing these things? I know that you get a lot of support for new buildings, but perhaps wouldn't there be an alumni that would want to put $6 million in here and have their name affixed to the heating plant and saving it?
Vice President Roberts Davis.
Chair Lee, Representative Pulaski, we do ask for philanthropic support for a lot of projects that we work on, but we are not pursuing philanthropic support for the Crookston facility specifically at this point in time.
Representative Pulaski.
Mr. Chair, then I would suggest to the university it might want to do that.
Thank
You
you.
don't need to respond.
Thank you, Representative Pulaski. Representative Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And, when we did the last stop, I asked a question about how do we deal with this potential, or not potential, but the actual demographic cliff that's coming with the birth rate peaking in 2007. And we saw that at the Humphrey Institute with our session last week. So when we have, looking at this substantial list of repair, how do we deal with that? I mean, are we talking about closing some things? If there aren't students, what do we do?
Vice President Roberts Davis.
Shirley, Representative, I'm not aware of the conversations about campus closures. I'm not sure that's something that we would discuss at this point in time, but I know that you are correct. There are some shifts in demographics, and there's a chicken and an egg philosophy as well, which is if the campus facilities are not appealing, is that the reason why students are choosing different campuses, different states, to go and pursue their degrees? And to the assistant professor's testimony, there are at least 3 other campuses that are in close proximity to ours that have new food science nutrition facilities, and we're seeing that they are actually attracting quite a few students. It's that type of thing that we have to be competitive about, and we want to make sure that we are in a position to attract top talent here. So,
Representative Henson. Representative Franzen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just kind of piggybacking off of what Representative Hansen had to say. So there's 600 students that are currently attending on campus at the University of Crookston, 900 online. The $10 million ask equates to about, just for the students that are on campus, those the 600, would be $16,670. I think this body does need to look out for the taxpayers of Minnesota and decide if, this is just this year's ask was $10 million. But as stewards of tax dollars, we have to decide if continuing to put money into a university that is not attracting students, maybe, we've got to think about consolidating schools.
Vice President Roberts Davis, any comments?
thank you, Chair Lee. It is a $6 million investment at this point in time, and it's something that is helpful to the university. It is something that we need in order to ensure that the students who are on the campus are safe and that they have a reliable heating system on the campus. And so it is very important that we make sure that we implement this change.
Representative Franson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, correct, the $6 million is for heating, but it's a $10 million ask total.
Vice President Roberts Davis.
Chair Lee, yes, Representative, if we were to do all the things on the Crookston campus list, however, we don't have, this would be, just the heating plant would be far in excess of what their proportion of any sort of allocation would be. So that would not be the plan.
You good, Representative Franson? So before we move on to Minnesota State, just real quickly, if you could follow up, I know that your request here is for $500 million. If you could just send us a list of your priority, if it's at 103, like you mentioned, it might just be all the top priorities, but I think it will be good for us to have that sheet. And then the last question that I have, just on this page right here, you said that 94% of the 2023 appropriations have been spent, encumbered, or otherwise obligated. Can you tell us of the amount that's been spent and encumbered? What is that amount? Is that the total amount that was appropriated in 2023?
I'm sorry, Chair Lee, the dollar amount that's been spent?
That's been spent or encumbered? Of the 43.35 million that was appropriated in 2023, can you tell us how much of that has been spent or encumbered?
I have it. I just have to look it up. It would be what we gave them
Mr.
Chair-
Swanson.
Chair Lee, the report that we sent at the end of January, the amount that was spent or encumbered under contract was 36%, but the obligated then would be anything that you can't not finish the project. So with the things that are under contract or encumbered come the obligated responsibilities. So that where we are in the status of the project, the higher number is a more accurate reflection of the progress we've made on the projects to date.
And so can you tell us what is the timeline of those that has been obligated from 36 to 94? I think that's a big jump. And so of the, those that are obligated, are they ready to go and be completed this year, or are you still looking into the future to complete those projects?
Chair Lee, most of those, if I'm just looking at the report that we sent in January, would be projects that are in design right now. So we may have procured the architect, and we have an estimate for what that construction cost would be. We would not yet entered into the construction contract, but as soon as the design is done, we'll be ready to move into construction.
Okay. Representative Ryer.
Thank you, Chair Lee. Thank you, Vice President, and also Dr. Hill Gallant and Mr. Larson. I always appreciate hearing from a student, so thank you for being here. My question is about the Governor's Task Force on Academic Health at the University of Minnesota. There are a number of references to capital investment, to bonding, to infrastructure, and I'm just curious how these would layer together, if that was considered as you looked at your priorities, if they considered your priorities when they were working on this, and what happens if a priority from the academic health report were to come up to the top. Well, how would that affect the rest of your HEPA requests?
Vice President Roberts Davis.
Chair Lee, Representative, the recommendations from the task force report are completely independent from our HEPA list.
Representative Ryer.
Thank you, Chair Lee. So if there were major funds needed for this, would it then come back and affect your HEPA? What would you anticipate?
Vice President Roberts Davis.
Chair Lee, we would expect that those would remain independent and that they would not be a part of our HEPA list. The HEPA list would be for our campus projects that we're hoping to reinvest in. The academic health would be a separate request.
Thank you both for being here to present the University of Minnesota's presentation.
Thank you for the opportunity, Chair and members.